our crime commentator, former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Bleksley. Peter, shambles doesn't begin to cover it.
David Lammy seems to have a very strange relationship with the truth, in my opinion. He clearly knew that this Algerian prisoner, a convicted sex offender, a man who'd been wanted on many levels, breach of his sex offender register conditions, breach of probation, and there's more, clearly a danger to the public. Lammy knew he was on the run, having been mistakenly released from prison. So to stand there and have the brass neck not to tell the truth tells us really what we all know about so many politicians. They put votes before victims. They're more concerned about spin and perception than they are about keeping the streets safe. And a government's primary role, it's what it's there for, is to keep its citizens safe. And on multiple levels, Lammy and this government are manifestly failing.
Brass neck is absolutely right. And in fact, he looked at James Cartledge, who had been a Justice Minister previously in the Conservative administration, and said they had failed rape victims. Well, there were clearly victims of sex attacks that David Lammy's officials and prison system was failing because of this, and he knew, and he must have known this was going to come out. It's bizarre behaviour. It really is very, very strange. There's so much detail that he knew and didn't tell us, even though he knew it was coming pretty soon. It's just very odd. And then a few hours later, HMP Wandsworth, which, I mean, isn't fit for purpose, tells us again that actually 2 days ago, another prisoner was released by mistake. William Smith, who's 35 years old. He was described as white, bald and clean-shaven, who was sentenced to 45 months for multiple fraud offences at Croydon Crown Court. And then on the same day, he was released. This is a prison that Daniel Khalif was managed to escape from. Lots of questions about that. And where a female prison officer was filmed having sex with a male prisoner. What's going on, Peter?
It's clearly in a chaotic state, and it's a very old Victorian prison. It's crumbling, it's rat infested, it's appalling. But let's just focus on Smith, the other prisoner, mistakenly released, if we may. He was convicted of fraud, so not a crime of violence, but to give you some indicator of the severity of his offending, for a non-violent crime of fraud, he got 45 months, nearly 4 years in prison. So his level of offending must be repeated and serious. And he is now out there on the streets instead of starting his sentence. What a basic error that the message gets sent that he's got a suspended sentence. No, no, no. He got a substantive prison sentence, not a suspended sentence. Utterly appalling, the state of our criminal justice system, from policing at the very front end, through to the Crown Prosecution Service, underfunded, underperforming, through to the courts, crumbling roofs, rubbish IT, courts sitting empty because there aren't the judges, then to the prisons, which we're focusing on today, and then to probation at the very far end of that system. It's all chaos, and consequently criminals are on the streets who shouldn't be, and we are all in a bit more danger.
Do you think David Lammy's worked out he's actually in government and actually responsible? I just want to read you another piece of this statement. Victims deserve better and the public deserve answers. I mean, you've quite literally just been questioned 5 times to provide basic answers to the House of Commons, which the public watch, and have failed to do so. And then you have the brass neck, that word, that phrase again, saying victims deserve better and the public deserve answers. That is why I've already brought in the strongest checks ever to clamp down on such failures and ordered an independent investigation led by Dame Lynn Owens to uncover what went wrong and address the rise in accidental releases, which has persisted for far too long and is persisting under his watch as Justice Secretary.
So let's just examine how those strongest checks ever are going.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I mean,
exactly,
really,
exactly.
It just goes to show it's nonsense. He has not got a grip. And it is so disrespectful to victims to not tell the truth when he had it at his fingertips that he could have done now. What about the victims of this 24-year-old Algerian? How are they feeling now, knowing that he's out on the street? And the Metropolitan Police have very recently put out an image of him being arrested in September. What if his victims
I'm not
see that? What do they think?
I'm not sure he cares, Peter, because he was asked a reasonable question about Hadush Kebatu's victim, that 14-year-old who was sexually assaulted in her school uniform. He was asked a reasonable question: have you picked up the phone? Have you spoken to her or her family? And then he gets really irate about that. You know, he says he cares about victims. He says victims deserve better. Wouldn't it have been a reasonable human thing to do for the Justice Secretary to say, even if he says it's not his fault, even if he says, look, there were systematic failures, this was a dreadful thing, I'm terribly sorry, I just want to pick up the phone. This isn't on camera, this isn't a media opportunity, this isn't me, David Lammy, showing off. It's just me being a decent human being and taking some responsibility and also giving a bit of human compassion. But my impression of David Lammy is if the camera's not on him and he isn't looking good, he doesn't care.
Instead, we get contemptuous treatment of victims, appalling attitude towards the man and woman on the street, the man and women who become victims of crime. And do you know what? He is such a vainglorious oaf that at the opening of PMQs today, he was talking about having bought a new suit this morning. These people and their craven lust for power, image, expensive suits, it applies to so many of them, and they are not the best of us, as we would expect to have those people running the country. They should be the best of us. Instead, we get Lammy, Starmer, Hermer et al. No wonder this country's a mess.
And he was mentioning, and so focused on how he looked and his new suit, that he forgot to put a poppy on. He was past a poppy halfway through to pin on his lapel by Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary. Later on, when asked about this, the Prime Minister's spokesman pointed to Mr Lammy opening PMQs with a tribute to veterans and the fallen on, ahead of Remembrance Day. That is, of course, the 11th, and Remembrance Sunday we will be marking here. Mr Lammy said, this weekend is Remembrance Sunday. We will never forget those who fought to defend our freedom. Wouldn't it have been a good idea to remember them by the small inconvenience of remembering to wear a poppy?
Well, that was clearly beyond David Lammy. Like, it appears something else that is beyond him is actually holding down office and having that department perform effectively, whether it's the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, which he got swiftly booted out of, or now the underperforming, almost joke criminal justice system.
What should happen now, Peter?
Well, I'm old enough to remember when politicians fell on their swords as a matter of honour. Something had happened on their watch. They took responsibility for it. It all seems like a very, very long time ago. The criminal justice system, as I laid out a few minutes ago, is in absolute crisis from front end to back end. Something needs to be done. But I fear that politicians will once again put the economy as their priority. They're not really concerned about you and I. If they were, they would have stopped the boats a long time ago. They would have smashed the gangs. They would have declared a state of emergency, I would suggest, so that particular new measures could have brought in to stop the flood of people illegally entering this country. And they would focus on the criminal justice system and get the brightest and the best in there to sort it out. But when we talk about brightest and best, perhaps we ought to swerve the Labour Party.
Peter, it's always good to talk to you. It's always good to get your take, especially on these big developing stories. There's so much common sense that you have. I know you're offering that common sense to people in local theatres on a tour. Just tell us a little bit about that.
8th of January, my 2026 tour starts, doing 140 venues, the length and breadth of the country. Please come and see me. Go to peterbleksley.com for tickets.
Excellent stuff. Peter Bleksley, our crime commentator, former Metropolitan Police detective, and you can go on his website, peterbleksley.com, to find out more information about his tour.